Hi guys, it's Amy here again to talk to you about French. They've invited me back on, so it mustn't have been that bad last time. I suppose we're going to chat today about where you should be at, and obviously we are, I think, this is coming out around the middle of Feb, so we have a midterm coming up. It's a really good time coming to the end of that first, I suppose, term after Christmas. It's a really good time for us to stop, assess, and look at where we can go from now. I know we kind of are looking now at only having a few weeks until the orals. And I know if you're in 60, you're kind of at the point now where you're like, God, the Leaving Cert's actually real. Like, I know up until this point, you're like, yeah, I have a Leaving Cert at the end of the year. But now you're kind of like, oh no, I have a Leaving Cert at the end of the year. So it's a really, really good kind of point in the year for us to stop, to look at what's working, what's not working, and how to, I suppose, fix any stress or worries that you might have. And you know, there's so much time left that you can really make the most of, that you can change the trajectory that you're on if you feel like you're kind of heading for an exam that you're not prepped for. Bit of a voice wobble there. I'm really, really excited to be here today. So I suppose in terms of where you should be at with your study and your assignments, I think like you're at the point now where hopefully you've been looking at exam questions all year. You've been looking at, obviously you would have been looking at kind of opinion piece topics with your teachers. You would have been looking at diary entries and practicing. Hopefully you took my advice from the last time and you've been looking at kind of vocab and comprehensions. You've been practicing speaking, because from midterm on, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I reckon there'd be probably about 4 or 5 weeks after the midterm until you have your orals, okay? Which is 4 or 5 weeks for you to really just knock it out of the park. So again, in terms of my advice, it would still be practice speaking, okay? You know that if I had to add anything, you know you have to speak for about 10 minutes. So you need to have 10 minutes of content. Even if you're reading it out loud, like obviously bear in mind that you read slightly quicker than you speak in kind of general conversation. But even if you write yourself a script of everything that you have prepared, read it out loud, time yourself when you read it. And if you can read everything and you're still only at 5 minutes, that's the max amount of time you will be able to speak in the exam without repeating yourself. Okay, so think, if I want to get the H1 or get the H2 and I only have 5 minutes of content prepared, is that going to translate well into me being able to answer every question? Like, remember with the marking scheme for the oral, you're looking at communication. Do I expound my answer? Do I communicate well? Do I give full answers? Do I answer the question they're actually asking me? And you're marked on structure, which is your grammar. Have I used the correct verb? Is my preposition good there? Am I using the right tense? You're marked on vocab. So if I say that I play football, can I say what position I play in? Can I say what colour my jersey is? Can I say how many times a week I train? And then the last one is pronunciation. And again, like I said, it's not that you need to be able to speak French like a French person, it's that you kind of are aware that there are differences between French and English. So that in English, things like T-I-O-N at the end of the word, we pronounce that shun, like nation, procrastination. That in French, that T-I-O-N makes a kind of a softer sound. It's sion, so nation, natation. And that's what they're looking for with pronunciation. And I think, like I say to my students, especially from now when you are really focusing on speaking, make a sound page, write it down, and you write down, okay, I know when I see these letters, it makes this sound. Because as you study, and like I know that you'll get to the week before the oral and you'll be up every day with your friends, practicing speaking to each other, which actually ends up being, it sounds so weird, but kind of ends up being fun. Like I did 3 languages in college and we'd have orals for each one each semester, so it's 6 a year. And sometimes talking absolute nonsense and like trying to pretend we knew how to say things was like the funnest part of college. So I don't want to say like make the most of like this time of exams, but you know what I mean? It's nice to study with your friends with that as well. But you know, that kind of practice and making sure that you know how things sound, that's where the marks go for pronunciation. Got a bit tangential there, so I'm so sorry about that. That's obviously just the oral again. With comprehensions, it is a case of, have you practiced every single one? Do you know what kind of questions you're getting? Do you know what the marking scheme is looking for? Like, look at the marking scheme, treat it like your best friend. At this point now that we kind of have a more solid foundation in French, the marking scheme is your best friend, okay? It is a looker, you know, it's a portal into the examiner's mind, because that's what they're thinking about when they look at your paper. So when you give them the paper, obviously it makes sense that that would be what you had in mind as you kind of completed the question. So, I know for this, they're normally looking for a whole phrase. I know for this type of question, they're looking for one word. Like, look through the types of questions that you've answered. Look at the marking scheme. Where did marks go for it? Why did this question get full marks? Why did this one only get 3 out of 5? And that is really where you are going to improve with comprehensions. Remember, 30% of your entire grade goes through reading comprehensions. So you need to make sure that you're nailing those. And this is where it gets really real. Until this point, it's making sure you know what the words mean. And now it's, okay, how can I get better? How can I score higher? Because if you're at the point where you were at this stage now, only getting kind of 30, 35, there's time now for you to improve that. If you're looking for H1, I'd say you need to be aiming for upwards of 50 out of 60 on those every single time. Again, if you're looking for kind of what to avoid, the written section is one where students find that balance really, really tough. So I know I kind of talked about it before. Don't learn essays off. I cannot explain to you how much you should not be learning whole essays, because the questions that come up in the French paper, if you go back and look, like I know I kind of organize it in my notes that it goes by topic. And if you look at the types of questions that come up on a topic, they're so weirdly niche every single time that how could you learn an essay for every question you might get? Did I get lucky last year and accidentally guess the whole paper? Yes. So you're welcome to my students, but you can't do that every year. You're not going to guess the exact question every time. So you need to have vocab that is adaptable to a topic rather than an essay that's ready to kind of throw onto a page. So that's where you should be focusing on learning kind of ideas about the topic and going, how can I fit this into this answer? And if you're working really hard at this point on even just planning for essays and going, okay, like remember your essay gets marked on communication and language. Communication is, did I answer the question? Is my answer accurate? And language is, how well did I answer the question in terms of, is my French accurate? Sorry, the first one should have been relevant. So is my answer relevant? Second one, is my French accurate? So you're looking for relevancy, accuracy. And if you're learning off an essay and just throwing it onto the page, yes, the French will be good, but will it answer the question? More than likely not. So they're the kind of do's and don'ts that I would give you. I suppose then for the rest of the year, I want to remind you more than anything that as you go into the oral, you're not wasting your time by only studying for the oral. And I know, like, it kind of came up last year that one of my students was like, I just feel like all I work on is the oral and I don't know where I should be focusing my time. Like, am I wasting my time just studying for the oral because my oral will be really good? But then I'm just kind of worried that like the rest of my paper won't be where it needs to be. And the thing is, you have to remember that on the oral, you get questions on abstract topics. You get questions on your hobbies. You get questions on day-to-day life. And then if you look at the kind of exam questions that come up, you see things like homelessness, which can come up in the oral. Last year, we had one on sport and COVID. You talk about sport in the oral. Obviously, you would have talked about COVID in the oral if you mentioned it. Remember, it's only going to come up if you mention it, for the most part. And then in comprehensions, we had how, we learned obviously we did a lot about the pandemic and TG now, like we can kind of leave that behind a small bit, but, we kind of looked at how life was affected, how school was affected. And then there was a comprehension on the paper on how a teacher started teaching online and started doing YouTube videos because school was closed because of COVID or due to COVID. And so the point that I'm making there, and what is the most important takeaway for you, is just because you are only learning for the oral, like because like quote unquote, that's the only thing you're doing right now, it doesn't mean that you're not setting yourself up to do really well in other areas of the exam. And that's what I really try and push with my students. And I know I kind of said it to you the last time that I spoke to you, but French is more about, or it's less to do with, can I learn this off? Can I make it, exactly how it is in the notes? And can I kind of then get that into the paper? It's more about, how can I put my spin on this? Like, it's language. Do you know two people that speak exactly the same? If you do, they're spending too much time together. Or, does every person that you speak to and every conversation you have always has those kind of little idiosyncrasies that make like the person that you're speaking to, that's like how you're speaking to them, So, my one friend says this one word all the time, and it's so funny. I always know when I'm texting them, or I always know when it's like from them or whatever, because they say this one thing. And that's the kind of thing you should be looking at with French. Like, how can I take what fits me and fits the way that I am comfortable with writing or comfortable speaking, and how can I then adjust that to fit any other paper or any other question that I might get? So if we're looking at an action plan, I would say focus on topics that are high frequency, we call them. So like you'll often see a question that's linked to school or education. You'll often see a question that's linked to health, so physical or mental health. You often see questions that are have a link with technology. So if I'm focusing on those kind of high frequency topics, what are the parts of language there that make sense to me, that fit how I communicate? And how can I then kind of assimilate that into my study, make notes on those, and then kind of break it back apart and put it into questions depending on where it will fit. And really that's it. Like, it's at this point now, practicing, looking at the exam, do an exam, you could do it 2 or 3 different ways, see what gets the best grade. Like, get your teacher, okay, I've done this answer and I've included points on health and technology, but actually I did it again, and the approach I'm going to take this time is maybe health and education. So you kind of, with that trial and error, you're finding ways of how you can make answers that you kind of know fit the marking scheme and fit your own style, because the more personal you can make your answer, the better you're going to do. Like, the examiner knows when you are just given back, like, they read the textbooks, they teach from the textbooks, so they know when you're just giving them notes from the textbooks that they also use. So if you can kind of put your own spin on it a small bit, especially in the oral, that is where, you're absolutely flying it there. Practice. It's just a case of do a little bit every day, because it's not like history, biology, or geography where you can learn the facts and then give them back on the day. It's kind of putting your own personal spin in it. And I know I've kind of said that a few times now, but that's really all it is. Like, you have put in so much work, you've been practicing from the very beginning, you're organized now, and it's just going on and making sure that you, on the day, use what you know. And that's where you're going to do really well in it. So I hope that helped, and best of luck with all the exams.